2019, the first one, and we're delighted to have Jinsoo Park here, who's going to talk about a short history of Korean ceramics. And as we can't go to Korea this October, we've had to postpone it from last year, this year, and then next October. So hopefully you can have a little taste of what we're going to see when we go there. And this is the last day of Jae-jun's exhibition as well. He's surrounded by his ceramics. He's working in Cardiff. He's over from Korea on a special talent visa after 5 years, and he's produced some wonderful work. And we sold quite a few pieces during the exhibition. So look forward to your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good to see all people here. My name is Jinsoo Park. I'm running a gallery called Hand Collections. We are located just in front of British Museum. I don't know anybody just popped in. I know you just popped in, but actually I'm going to talk about Korean ceramic history just briefly, because you guys are all going to Korea, and then you will see a wonderful collection in the museums in Korea, and also you're going to visiting the contemporary ceramics studio, pottery studio as well. So I think it might help you out just to figure out what is Korean ceramics all about, and if you've got some kind of basic little bit knowledge, and your touring Korea would be much appreciated to see something very beautiful things over there. So a lot of people thinking about Korea. Korea is just kind of in between China and Japan. You know, you're assuming that Korea has got very similar sort of cultural trend to Chinese or Japanese. But in fact, we have very distinguished sort of culture in between three countries. Although we owe to the China for lots of ceramic things, we learned a lot of things from China from Song Dynasty time. Well, because beforehand, Korea actually had a Three Kingdom period. We produced lots of fantastic stoneware things. But from 9th century, when Korea Kingdom started, Korea Dynasty started in Korean Peninsula, they obviously made a lot of contact with the Song Dynasty, and we actually exchanged lots of things in between two countries, Northern Song and Southern Song. And we are kind of medium body to passing something from China to Japan. So Japan always got something from us, not only ceramics, but lots and lots of different aspects of culture and also system and everything. So it's worthwhile to starting with, because I found that since I run my gallery, I found that lots of audiences in UK, British people, when they come to see our collections, they know nothing about Korean pieces, and they always mention about Chinese and Japanese, and also they always mention these kind of 15th century Funcheon pieces. They call them Mishiba or something Hakame, or things, all this kind of Japanese terminology. So that makes me really kind of I've got the mission to correct them.
So what era is Funcheon?
Funcheon is starting 15th century to 16th century. So 100 years time we produce in a certain style. So I think my concern is two kind of main facts, which is really, it's not really popular Korean things in UK, because one thing, we don't have many publications available prior 1970s about Korean culture and everything. And secondly, people don't really appreciate Korean culture, Korean ceramic, Korean paintings at all. So I think that is two main facts. But now we have more publications available, and then people now more recognizes Korea, and then so we've got, like you guys have a group and we go to Korea to see something. So I think for me, really kind of positive things is really good sign for it. I just tried to quoting the keeper of the Oriental ceramic in 1940s, the gentleman called William Honey. He's the person who actually very first person to make an article on Korean ceramic in 1940s, and he was the first person to see the beauty of Korean ceramic in UK. So just to quote him, I just found really fantastic wording from it, so I think I really wanted to share with you guys. He said that the best Korean wares are not only original, they are the most gracious and unaffected pottery ever made. They have every virtue that pottery can have. Their shapes are simple, characteristically beautiful in proportion and outline, flowering easily and naturally into plastic and other decorations, inside or inlaid, or unsurpassed beauty and strength. This Korean pottery reaches heights hardly attained even by the Chinese. It has at all times a great dignity, a quality which is said to be in accord with the character of the Korean people. So basically, Mr. Honey, who really kind of appreciating when he got to see the collection in Vienna at the time, 1940s. Obviously, since William Honey, and we've got the Mr. Bombos in 1960s, he wrote two books. One book is dedicating to Korean celadon. One book is dedicating to the white porcelain. Of course, he donated most of the pieces to Fisherly museums. You know why he actually donated?
Why Cambridge?
Yeah, why Cambridge? I was really kind of interesting to know because I visited one of his eldest son, Richard Gombert, who lives in Ascot. Oh. He still has some pieces from his father. He told me that because Richard was students in Cambridge, so his father wanted to get to Cambridge. It's really a modern British museum. I think it's such a great shame because you should go to a British museum rather than this really. And it's still.
Oh, it's a great collection. Yeah, it's a great one.
So in here in this country, Mr. Gombos was the kind of in before we have very few collectors who are actually collecting Korean pieces, but in very near number. They are all kind of Chinese collectors, Japanese collectors. But Mr. Gombos was the first person who actually dedicating his kind of collecting habit into Korean pieces, and also he actually lives in Korea quite a while. And I'd like to talk about the celadon because Mr. Gombos, he was really fell in love with the Korean celadon. Well, he collecting a lot of things, but the celadon is we starting in Korea in 9th century as we actually importing from China. But we actually copying early stage of the Chinese celadon. But 10th century, 11th century, you can see slightly different aspect. We actually kind of developing on our ways. And then you can see in 12th century, we actually achieving the so-called inlay technique we call sangang. Inlay techniques, which is you obviously have a stone there, but the celadon is basically a stoneware with a celadon glazing, and these two are here we call pure celadon. This is 11th century.
So celadon is the glaze.
Yeah. And this is stoneware, so you can see the picture here is quite dark clay. So to achieve this color is very, very difficult. They have a very special ashtray glazes, and also they have to achieve very high temperature, over 1,300 degrees. Otherwise, you can't get this wonderful color. And this one also same period. You cannot see them inside great details, but we've got inside of the we call in Korean pa, which means pa is wave, means fish. So fish in the wave. Actually, you can people who made this one just trying to depict it. You can, when you're drinking a tea with this, you can see the fishes in here. It's like a pond. It has really well resolved, but it's not really kind of perfect, kind of round. You know, always Westerners always looking for something without perfect proteins and flawless the things, but the Korean potters never bothered about it. They just kind of, you know, go ahead and whatever shapes and whatever finish they got, they don't really care about it. So not only celadon, but Incheon and white porcelain, you will see these Korean things for it's not the imperfection is our kind of one of our characteristics, I feel, our aesthetics. So when you may understand about this aesthetic, then you will see in Korea loads of different stuff, and then you have a great appreciation. You will get it. And this is the later version of the celadon, as we called inlaid. I told you before. This one to achieve this one, the potters are using the stoneware. And then basically they incised all the patterns you hear. This is a chrysanthemum with kind of scrolls, which is kind of a repeat. And you have a black one and a white one. And in order to do that, they just incised patterns and then just filled in with two different clay. So the people call this, to make a black color, is reddish clay, and the white is white clay. But the potters at the time, they discovered that when they're actually using the same color, same clay as the basic the clay which makes the body, entire body, if they use the same sort of clay, then after firing, they found that these inlaid parts are all kind of break. You have what do you call it? It's not break. It's just kind of yeah. So they try to find out another clay which is just making no effect with such a high temperature and skill. So they found it at least. So it's making a sangam technique. So you've got, this is a small kind of, we call it yubium. It's contain a kind of oils. Some people just believe that this is maybe this is oil for the ladies' cosmetic things, and some people believe that maybe this is kind of oils putting things in using in the kitchen. So we don't know exactly usage, but we call it oil bottles. And of course we have inlaid techniques. If you couldn't see visiting National Museum of Korea, have a fantastic inlaid, large pieces, ewers and mapping and all sorts of different shapes you can find it. And Goryeo dynasty starting 918 until 1392. It's 500 spanning all long history of dynasty. They obviously ended in 1392, and we found another dynasty called the Joseon. The Japanese often referring as E dynasty because the Joseon dynasty ruled by royal family. Their family name is E. So the Japanese called it E dynasty, but we never called them E dynasty, Joseon dynasty. So Joseon dynasty 1392 they started, and then they ended up in early 20th century until we've been occupied by Japanese colony. From Joseon, new dynasty started. These celadons are very much about the produced for aristocratic and royal family purposes. And then hence you have a Goryeo dynasty occupied by the kind of very high culture from Buddhism. So Buddhism, you need kind of Buddhist painting, Buddhist sculptures, and also other utensils and other things. So they make very elaborative and very splendid paintings and other stuff. So hence the celadon you can find the ewers are kind of melon-shaped ewers and melon-shaped bottles. They're just exquisite in the shapes and very, very, very well done. And then it's like a very kind of feminine style of shapes you always find from the Celadon. Well, actually, coming to the Joseon period, and the Joseon dynasty, the royal family, the Yi family, they actually rejecting Buddhism, and they introducing a Neo-Confucianism. So the Confucianism also came from China. The Joseon dynasty, they obviously accepted the Confucianism as a social norms and political manifestos, and they just kind of ruling whole society, every aspect of the people's life. So the Celadon ceramic is also reflecting from the Confucian doctrines and their kind of teaching. So unfortunately, the potters who had a great skill, great techniques to make such wonderful pieces, but still they didn't allow to have any kind of signature on the bottom or the side because they are socially very, very low rank people. So you don't allow anything to sign for it. So if you have, if you've got the kind of a sign in any kind of art, is only you can find in paintings, literacy painting. These aristocratic people, they made painted, and then they have allowed to have their seals inside. But these people, unfortunately, they never ever allowed to get the signs on bottom. So we don't know anyone about anyone potter's name and so on. But luckily, 1592. End of 16th century, the Japanese Toyotomi Hideyoshi, he came to invaded Korea. Actually, the purpose is come to invading Korea. Actually, he invaded China. So this is only the way he has to pass the Korean peninsula, get into China. So then he had to make Korea is colonized first, and then go to China. So it's 7 years long war period. We called this invasion, we called the Ceramic War. That changed both countries' ceramic history by and birds. Before they came to the Korea, and in Korea we have an abundant number of people who are making wonderful potteries for everyday use, for also the royal court as well. Once they came and they actually took thousands of potters, they actually removed them from Korea to Japan and then forced them to making a wonderful kind of these things. So 15th century, when Joseon dynasty started, the Celadon traditions just fade away, and then new started buncheon. We call buncheon basically means a stoneware with covered by white silk. This Celadon is just a stoneware covered with the Celadon glazing, but this one is the same clay, but you've got different kind of finish. This is the white silk. So because these are actually Celadon, we actually excavated Hue site, the main Celadon productions area in southwest coast of South Korea. We call Gangjin and Busan area. Two areas of main productions of factory at the time. They actually produce a massive number of the Celadon, and we export to China. And then in 1123, this gentleman called Su Jin, he was the envoy of the Northern Song Dynasty, the cabinet. He came to Korean Peninsula to see our Korea king, and at the time he actually making a kind of book called Travel to Korea, and in that book he obviously mentioned about Korean Celadon, and he said Korean Celadon was a green blue, kind of he described as a jade green color. And then he thought this is really great color, it's better than Chinese. So he was very kind of astonishing to see that and how Korea actually achieved this level of techniques. So we have this kind of historical record showing Korea has achieved very high techniques of going to producing celadon. But these are highly controlled by central government, I guess. But Buncheon, you can see here, these bunches are, we don't actually control by central government. But these are the we found all kind of corner of the South Korean peninsula. So this we called the Buncheon bowl with stampy design. So basically, you have the potters having like a wooden stamp with this dot design and just kind of gone all the way down and white slip, and then they just have a stamp and then put them glazing on top and put them in the coat. So this is we found loads of them in southeast coast of South Korea. I don't know whether you're going to visit in the largest second city in Busan in Korea.
Where, sorry?
Busan.
Busan,
Yeah,
Busan.
Yeah. These things are produced in that sort of area, surrounding area, so we can find a lot of these things. And this one, you can see we call it pia. And so when the potters actually put in this bowl and on their wheels, while the wheel is going around, they're actually using the very rough kind of brush made by pig hairs. They just put them in white slip and then they just kind of put them in a bowl and making this all brush work marks. Yeah, so this is the very kind of sort of design created in southwest coast of South Korea. And you can find we have lots excavated in kiln site. We've got lots of shell of these kind of things. And then another technique of Buncheon is called this dunbar. It's a dipped bowl. So basically, potters making this one and have a rice wheel and put them in the rice wheel. And then you just take it and put it in the bowl. So we call dunbar. It's a dip. So as you can see, this is very irregular. It's a wall. This type of character is really kind of Japanese doing that. So when they invaded Korea beforehand, they really loved this kind of ball. And then, this is quite an interesting history part because the Koreans use this as a rice ball, or sometimes we put in a kind of stew. But this one kind of usage is changed by Japanese. Japanese use it as a tea ball and make a matcha. You know the green teas in here? Yeah, so, but we never drink in tea like large bowls. We don't have such a trendy things in Korea. And finally, this one is another Buncheon, which is really found in the metropolitan football. Yeah. This is Buncheon. It's quite exciting things. You can see that patterns are. It's quite kind of a whimsical and lyrical things. We don't know what kind of things is simplified, but the potter is making such a fun, and he just making these patterns whatever he feels. We found these things in a kiln site around capital Seoul area. So we have very clear regional character in 15th century about Buncheon. And finally, another Buncheon piece is a very distinctive one here. This we called Geryongsan. Geryongsan means san is a mountain, and Geryong is a mountain's name. Geryongsan is located in the middle of South Korea. It's not far from capital. I think it's 1.5 or 2 hours ride. You made it past that city. Yeah. This one in that area, they have a kiln site in 15th century. This is again white slip. You can see these white slip, still you can see the brush mark. So white slip they just covered with multiple times of brush. Not with they have iron glaze decorations. So these also, we don't know what they're actually for, but we call maybe some flower, simplify the flower patterns. So again, this is very kind of primitive sort of things, but in 15th century, these bottles are just for using for cleaning up the wines and served in every household when they have a lot of meals. Yeah, so these are the Bunchang things. And you got to see the Korea or even the British Museum when you visit in Vienna, the Korean gallery, you will see all this similar stuff. So you can see we have different patterns and different decoration of Bunchang. And they produced 100 years time. And then when end of 16th century, Korea started producing the porcelain. And then suddenly this Bunchang legacy is stopped in Korea, but it's just going on in Japan until now. So I think that is really, for me, is good things is just still going on anyway. So we've got some of the nice porcelain things. I'm just trying to show you that we've got this is really good quality, produced in Morocco in the 19th century, and because the Bunchang they were made in Morocco, so they are really kind of representing the potter's wills and potter's free expressions and things. But porcelain things are such like this small one is controlled by governments and they quality always kind of made controlled, so you can see very distinctive bluish the glazing in like porcelain in 19th century. And the other things, other porcelains here you can see is all different colors. Before just going to the details, I just try to go about more details about porcelain. When the I don't know whether you heard about Soetsu Yanagi.
Yes,
Yanagi.
yeah.
Yanagi. He met. He lives in Chiba, near Tokyo, and it was in 1914. One of his friends called Asakawa Mitaka. He came to see Yanagi with one Korean pot. Faceted jar, and explained about he bought it from Korea and then presented him as a friend. What do you think? And Yanagi was fell in love with straight away with that pot. And since then he actually visited Korea more than 10 times. Just spending a week or 2 weeks and just trying to buy and collecting Korean wares. And you know the Mingei movement in Japan. So Yanagi was the person who actually advocates the Mingei movement, and then some of the academics and some of the people mentioned that because Yanagi came to Korea 1916, 17, 18 from until 1924, and he actually collecting it, and then not only he actually collecting Korean pottery or other Korean furnitures, but he opened Korean Mingei Museum in Seoul first, and then Mingei Museum in Tokyo, followed by that. So for him is a Mingei kind of aesthetic development. It's actually coming from Korean ceramics and Korean furniture, Korean woodworks, Korean craft. So he actually heavily influenced by that. And of course, when Bernard Leach came to Japan, and Yanagi happily recommended him to come to Korea and see all different ceramic, and then you will be appreciated because Japanese ceramic history is owing to Korean side, so you've got to see it. in the you know the Arita the ceramics, which makes well, Japan's economy is really kind of abundant in the 17th, 18th century. You know how the Arita ceramics.
They kidnapped some Korean poets and they went to that part.
Yeah, exactly. So that gentleman called Lee Sang-pyong, his surname is also Yi. It's like a royal family name. So Yanagi knows all of that, and then he actually recommended to Bernard to go to Korea. And Bernard, he done so a couple of times, came to Korea. The last time, 1937, he visited. He bought Everest, popular Moonjang. So, but he had lots of other things as well. But I don't know whether you have had a chance to see other Bernard Korean collections, which is now in all the gosh, I can't remember the name. Ceramic Study Center in Farnham.
I've been. Haven't been.
Yeah. I think it's worth to visit because they got a kind of the Bernard Rich's Korean collection. It's wonderful.
They took on the British collection.
So
as an amateur.
So it's the Yanagi who played a kind of pivotal role in the movement, and then he obviously making a media museum in Korea at the time. And I think I just trying to say that because the porcelain in Korea made in a world kiln at the same time local kiln as well. So we've got lots of different local sites. They're producing their own kind of porcelain stuff. So some of the porcelains for the casual eyes very inferior, and it's not really good quality, high quality. But what I'm saying to you, these kind of things, I think this is one of these things Bernard Rich really fell in love with. Yeah. This is actually produced in local kiln, so you don't see such a.
Which part of Korea?
I don't know. I really don't know which part of Korea, but this is definitely local kiln productions, because with this kind yeah, and also this bottle. This is a wine bottle. Korea, you got something similar things, but in Korea in the past, every single town, every single village, there's like in England you've got pubs here, ales here. Korea we have a kind of style of local ale house. So everyone comes to the village and town, they're sitting down as a family group or whatever, they just sitting down and having a meal, or they drink we call it makgeolli, so rice wine. So these bottles are just served with full of rice wine. When you order it, the owners bring this bottle with a cup of maksaba, because like this one.
Big.
Yeah. because the makgeolli rice wine. I don't know. You guys, have you ever tried makgeolli before? No.
No.
Yeah. This is not very. It's not very trying to contain kind of high sort of alcohol sometimes. So low alcohol, so you can drink a lot. Oh. So this kind of something, and you just pouring them and drinking it. Obviously, this one is just becoming a tables in Japan, but this 15th century bottle is actually for drinking wine. So either you just put the rice on it. So these bottles in the 19th century, presumably every household, ale house, they have these things and then served to the people. Probably this one for only when people just came by themselves and serving this one for one portion. And you can see this one is much larger. This is you can share your between 2 or 3 maybe. And see, this is our iron glazing decorations. And these kind of things in 19th century in Korea, it's a local kiln productions, which is not really a highly priced object at all. But these things are spotted by Yanagi and his friends, and also Bernard Leach. He loves these kind of things. He's saying that, Bernard Leach always saying that, refinement is not an important, necessary thing in pottery. It's a pottery itself is important. So he actually make attention to these kind of things, and presumably he actually trying to make a copy out of these shapes and these glazing things. So sometimes I put these kind of things on our gallery on the front, in the window display. A lot of people just mention, they just come in and say, is this religious? So they just make it all confusing. Yeah. So yeah, these are this large jar. Well, it's quite large. They're just trying to show you, because this one it does have 18th century jar, which has a lots of character similar to 18th century ninja. Because we had a vector white person exhibition going on in our gallery, but unfortunately 18th century ninja sold out, and then the buyer, eager buyer, she just not really wanted to keep it until the finished exhibition. She wanted to have it. So I cannot show you around today. But this one quite similar to the character of the ninja, 18th century ninja. So it's kind of these are all irregular, and also it's kind of dented, kind of, it's not perfect shapes. Mm-hmm. But this is one of the character of Korean porcelain. So this kind of jar contains like honeys, and people just print loads of different, but sometimes people print hearts even. So it's very much about utilitarian pieces. Assuming that every single household has got one or two of these jars. But unfortunately, even these jars these days, it's quite rare to see them, because we've been suffered from a colonial period, and also we have a Korean War for 5 years. So we're just losing so many our heritage, including these kind of jars. So these are all humble pieces, but the Yanagi and these people actually make attention to these kind of pieces, and then they make it into a different categorization as a mingen, and then they just becoming like they just entitle their own as a art forms. And before in Korea, Koreans never really recognize this as this is kind of art, or this is kind of artworks from people. We don't recognize in that way. We just recognize this as just kind of utilitarian pieces we ever use in the kitchen, and that's it. And when you having a chip and cracks, what they do, they just using the feeding for dogs and animals. So when Yanagi came to Korea, and he was shocking to see how on earth people just using this wonderful piece to feeding the dogs. But Koreans, of course, it's just kind of everyday. It's a very normal piece.
So you don't repair them like kintsugi in Japan?
No. It's it's thanks to Japan, because Japan is, they actually got old Korean traditions, and then they just make them glorify all the different ways. So I'm really kind of always making clapping my hands. Oh, well done, Japan. But it's Korea. We don't do that. I mean, it's when it's you have cracks and you have broken, we just leave them as it is, and never we making a serious kind of kintsugi repair it. It's just Japanese tradition, I guess. So these are three main different kind of Korean ceramic traditions, and these things are the in contemporary time in Korea, because we've been nearly 35 years in the Japanese colony, and it's finished by 1945. And then we have a few years, we have a whole country being kind of like as a whole Korea. And then Korean War broke in 1950. So it was ended in 1954, I think, 1955. So it's kind of the early 20th century, the half of 20th century, Korea was suffered from very kind of harsh time really. And of course, because of that, potters, they don't really kind of practice any kind of things or traditions. So we're losing the way of making celadon, way of making bunchan, way of making porcelain things. They just broke up. So after South Korea established a government in 1955, and the government initiated to reviving Korean culture and Korean heritage, so they just tried to find out the potters who are going to make these kind of things and just reviving a Korean tradition again. So first generation of the potters in Korea at the time, the few of them. I don't know whether you're going to visit in Icheon. There's
So we go to each other.
yeah, when you go to Icheon, you
Like
have
the
the
conference sort of thing, and then lots of
Yeah.
pottery.
yeah. There's the gentleman called Haegang. His pen name is Haegang. His name is Yu Gun-hyun. He was the kind of first generation after the war, trying to rejuvenating Korean ceramic history and just trying to. He was really good at making celadon. And then another chap called Jinsoo Park, and he was kind of very close friends, making together when the South Korea government established the kill site in heart of Seoul, Daebangdong Gangwa we call it. And they worked together and producing this kind of tradition Korean ceramic. They found the relevant glazing and things. So these. I wanted to try to show you that since then we've got lots of potters working for the actually I call it the first generation, few of them, since the Republic of Korean period. And then second generations, they are all actually students of these masters. And this one is made by Dr. Shin Sang-ho. I don't know whether you heard about him. When you go to the British Museum, way before you get entrance to Korean Gallery, and you kind of very large landing, don't you? And then you have a very large cabinet there, and you have a very large Swiss kind of ceramic object, very large one. One of them made by Shin Sang-ho. He is like a second generation. He learned from the pottery. He was a medical student, but he just gave up his career. He just became a potter, and he learned his pottery from Jinsoo Park. And also you can visit in his studio in Icheon area. And this is one of his work in early 1980s. This is a stampy decorations. He just this is a stamp original. And you can see there's a chrysanthemum in the center. He just kind of making small chrysanthemum apply entire body. So this is kind of things during the 1970s, 80s and 90s, Korean contemporary potters trying to rejuvenate Korean culture, but slightly different manner. They just kind of developing their own sort of decorations. So this one is very much about fashion at the time. Of course, the Japanese audiences was really wanted to eager to buy one of these works as well. And also, when Queen Elizabeth visited Korea in 1999 on her birthday, and our government had a kind of banquet for her birthday party. And our governments actually gave her lots of the birthday present. And his piece is one of them to present to Queen. And so this piece is in our trust collection at the same time in British collections and also DNA. You find inside pieces. So he was the dean of Hong Kong University, which is the well-known art department university in Korea, the best one we call it. So he was the actually dean of the ceramic department and teaching lots of students. And he's still doing his work of 80s now. So he's the second generation. And I used to show third generations. He is now 60 something, but he's slightly younger than him. And he also when these Dr. Shinsang works in kind of 1980s, we have a Yung Guangzhou. He was a bunchen maker, so he's very famous. And he was the second generation. And Kimono, he was the student of Yung Guangzhou. And these are, you can see this is a dip ball techniques. He obviously using local clay, stoneware, and then you just dip into white wood. But white wood color is quite different. You can see these are the original 15th century white wood. This one is a slightly different colors. And also you can touch it afterwards, and these are all very thick, and it's quite heavy. So it just changing a little bit forms as well. So probably this one is made in 1990s, just targeting to Japanese audience who actually came to achieve this.
I think it's a cheapo or
Yeah. Social
Not
thing.
big enough
Yeah. So I think the last piece I just wanted to show this one. This is the 10th century piece, Korea piece. In Korea period, you've got the iron glaze entirely, and then you've got the decoration with the white slip. This is the 10th century. We've got the last piece in Le Mans, whose collection was it? Who actually donating to most of his pieces to V&A, and you will see very similar things in V&A. So this is, in Japanese called dokuri. We never ever called dokuri. This is what we call this small child. So I suppose this one again for utensil pieces to put in the kitchen and put them in kind of soy sauce or whatever. But these are very typical glazing in the Goryeo period. The Goryeo period, not only they producing celadon, Goryeo period they still producing porcelain, white porcelain, and also this iron glazing and lots of different stuff. But the celadon is just so kind of well known, and people know, so when they talk about Korea pieces, they automatically think celadon. So I want to show you celadon, but alongside with these small things, but you will see in Korea museums, you will see a lot of different spectrum of Korea's ceramic productions. So I think that's it for my presentations.
thank you so much. Thank you.